Hey friends, I want to share with you something really powerful from the life of George Müller. You've probably heard about him. He's the man who cared for thousands of orphans in Bristol, England. But here's the part most people miss. He didn't start the orphan houses just to care for children. Of course, he loved them and wanted to give them food, shelter, and education. But his bigger purpose was to prove, in a very visible way, that God is still alive, still faithful, and still answers prayer. Let me take you through it step by step. Why George Müller started the orphan work. Müller looked around at Christians in his day and was really troubled. He noticed three main groups of believers struggling with faith. First group, older Christians who were worried about old age. They kept thinking, what if I can't work anymore? Will I end up in the poorhouse? Even when Müller reminded them, but God has always cared for his children. They still acted like God had stopped being the living God. Second group, Christian businessmen. These men loved God, but when it came to business, they behaved almost like unbelievers. They justified dishonest practices by saying things like, the economy is bad. There's too much competition. If I don't cut corners, I won't survive. They rarely showed the courage to run their businesses purely God's way and just trust Him to bless it. Third group, people stuck in jobs or situations they knew weren't right before God. They wanted to leave, but fear kept them tied down. They thought, if I quit, how will I survive? Who will provide for me? These things broke Müller's heart. He kept thinking, if only people could see that God hasn't changed. He's still the same God who provides, protects, and answers prayer today. And so, a bold idea formed in his mind. What if there was a public, visible project that clearly showed God's power? Something no one could deny. That's when the orphan house idea came alive. If he, a poor man with no rich backers, could pray and trust God alone, and God provided everything needed to feed, clothe, and house orphans, then both Christians and unbelievers would see with their own eyes, God is real. God still answers prayer. Yes, He cared about helping children. Yes, He wanted to train them in the fear of God. But His main reason was to create a living example of faith in action, learning from others who trusted God. Now, Müller didn't come up with this idea out of nowhere. He had been inspired by another man of faith, A.H. Frank, a German Christian, who had also started a huge orphan house in complete dependence on God. Müller had seen Frank's work with his own eyes, and it deeply moved him. He thought, if God could do that for Frank, He can do the same here in England through me. This gave him courage. He realized that his special calling was to trust God's word literally and encourage others to do the same. The struggle, is this really God's will? But here's something important. Müller didn't jump in quickly. For the first 2 weeks after the thought of starting an orphan house came to him, he only prayed silently. He said to God, if this idea is from you, please bring it to life. But if it's not from you, please take it away from me completely. Notice that he wasn't asking for money, a house, or help as yet. He was only asking for clarity. He wanted to be sure this was God's will, not just his own imagination. That's a big lesson for us too, right? Sometimes when we feel stirred to do something, the first step isn't to rush, but to seek God carefully in prayer. God speaks through His word. Then came the breakthrough moment. One day, Müller was reading his Bible and came across Psalm 81:10, open thy mouth wide, and I will fill it. Those words hit him hard. He thought, all this time, I've only been praying small prayers, just asking if it's God's will or not. I haven't asked boldly for the actual needs of the orphan house. Right there, he decided to open his mouth wide. He got down on his knees and prayed big, specific prayers. Müller's bold prayers. Here's what he asked God for: a house, whether rented, loaned, or even given permanently. £1,000, a huge amount at that time. Faithful workers to help care for the children. Furniture and clothing for the orphans. He didn't give God a deadline. He simply said, Lord, if this is your will, I'm asking for all this, and I trust you to provide in your timing. Immediate answers from God. Now here's where it gets exciting. Within just a few days, God began answering those bold prayers in surprising ways. On December 10, 1835, Müller received a letter from a Christian couple. They wrote, "We'd like to serve in the orphan house if you think we are qualified. We'll even give up all our furniture for the house. And we won't take a salary. We'll trust God to provide for us." Think about that. He hadn't asked them or even told them directly. They just felt led by God. On December 13, 1835, another man promised to give 4 shillings every week. That's about £10.8 a year. He even gave the first 2 weeks' money right away. That same day, yet another couple offered themselves, all their furniture, and even all the food in their house to the orphan work. In just a matter of days, without Müller asking anyone, people and resources started flowing in. It was like God was saying, "Yes, George, this is my plan. Go ahead, I'll provide." What this proved. For Müller, this was all the confirmation he needed. He realized God had not changed. God still stirred people's hearts to give. God still heard and answered prayer. And this was exactly the point. The orphan house was not just a shelter for children. It was a living testimony to God's faithfulness. So, friends, that's how it all began. George Müller saw a lack of faith among Christians. He wanted to give them a living, visible proof that God still provides. Instead of complaining about the situation, he became the example. By starting the orphan work and depending only on prayer, not asking anyone for money, he set out to show the world God is real. God is faithful. God still answers prayer. And as we'll see in the next chapters, God didn't fail him. Not once. Sometimes we make God too small in our minds. We worry about tomorrow, about bills, about our future. But George Müller's story reminds us to open our mouths wide, to pray boldly, specifically, and in faith, because God hasn't changed. He's still the living God today.